Good evening and welcome to Surrey Butterfly Conservation online winter talks via Zoom. My name is Richard Stevens and I have been a member of Butterfly Conservation since 2014. Keen to explore the local area, I first came across the Lingfield Nature Reserve in 2015, whilst looking for local sites to visit for butterflies. I was invited to join their monthly work parties, and ultimately I became involved with the management of the reserves. This is a brief history of how two parcels of farmland and former horse paddocks became Lingfield Nature Reserve. Lingfield village is located in the southeast corner of Surrey, close to the Kent border. Lingfield Nature Reserve is less than half a mile from the centre of Lingfield and around about half a mile from Lingfield railway station. It is bordered by farmland to the north and west and the residential areas of Lingfield to the south and east. Should you visit the reserve, parking is in residential roads. This is an aerial view of the reserves. In the early 1990s, a group of like-minded locals led by Anne Richards wanted to safeguard some local fields from development. In 1994, after lots of lobbying and village meetings, Tandridge District Council, at the suggestion of Tandridge Parish Council, set up Lingfield Wildlife Area, originally containing Bloomers and Jenner's Field. This is Bloomers Field, and this one here is Jenner's Field. In 1995, Tandridge Parish Council purchased from Surrey County Council another parcel of land of approximately 11 acres, which became known as Century Field since the year 2000. And since the year 2000, it's been known as Beacon Field. This was to mark 100 years of Lingfield Parish Council. The land originally consisted of 12 allotments, a small field, and 2 interlinked hedge fields or horse paddocks, and was adjacent to the Lingfield Wildlife Area. Another committee was formed to look after it. Shortly afterwards, the 2 committees merged and now manage around 26 acres or 10.5 hectares of land. An acre of land is approximately 1 football pitch or 16 tennis courts. This is the story of how a group of locals developed the area originally known as the Lingfield Wildlife Area to become Lingfield Nature Reserve, and only the second village in the UK to achieve local nature reserve status a few years later. Initially, the land consisted of low-lying meadows with ryegrass surrounded by barbed wire and a few hedges. Incidentally, the soil is clay with upper Tunbridge sand and a pH of 6.5. The first project was to plant hedges to divide up the fields and increase the habitat and biodiversity. The hedges were planted using saplings with a local provenance supplied by English Woodlands or grown from locally gathered seed by the volunteers. Existing hedges that had become overgrown were relaid or pleached, which is the process of interweaving supple young branches with cut stakes to make a stock-proof hedge. We are lucky to have Roger Olson, who has been a volunteer since the early days and still lays hedges for us the traditional way, and his son, Daniel, often helps. This slide shows a pleached and layered hedge that was done in 2019. And This is 2 years later. They normally last about 12 years before you have to relay them. Sorry, I should point out on the slide at the bottom, this shows that this slide will repeat, but it will show you the area in the reserve where the actual picture was taken. The hedges are managed by cutting on a 3-year cycle, of flailing or cutting with powered hedge trimmers and hand shears, in line with our higher level stewardship agreements. This is the view of a hedge that divides Jenner's Field from Beaconsfield, and it's due for a trim. Over the last 25 years, thousands of new trees have been planted to create a half a mile of new hedges and woodland areas, including a copse and a spinney. In addition, 70 species of fruiting trees were planted to create an orchard. And we have at least one of every species of native tree growing on the reserves, including black poplar and a rare smooth-leaved lime that is only found in East Anglia. In 1998, Cold Harbour Copse was planted. With 500 native trees: oak, ash, hornbeam, field maple, hawthorn, whitebeam, small-leaved lime, and hazel. The advice at the time was to overplant as 30% of the trees would die in the first year, but they didn't, hence the need to thin and coppice now. This is 6 years on in 2014, and you can see the trees have grown. In 2019, we coppiced some of the trees to open up. This is a view of Cold Harbour Copse now. You see the trees are looking quite mature. In 2019, we coppiced some of the trees to open up a glade for speckled-wood butterflies. The cut branches were used to build dead hedges to reduce the footfall on areas of the woodland where bluebells have been seeded and other wildflowers such as primroses have been planted. Following on the successes of the wildflower ditches, which I'll cover later, last October, we created another new bank for a hedge and a ditch for wildflowers. The Hedge and Ditch is over 100 yards long and bisects Bloomer's Field. In December 2020, it was planted with 550 locally sourced saplings of blackthorn, hawthorn, alder buckthorn, and spindle. This will provide habitat for nesting birds and food plant for insects, including the brimstone and brown hair-streaked butterflies and many moths. This is the hedge, the planting's finished and it's been mulched with hay that's been cut from the fields last autumn. These are the butterflies we're trying to encourage, or they already occur on the reserve, but we're trying to encourage more. In future years, it will be a massive early spring blossom with autumn fruits for birds and mammals. This is blackthorn and hawthorn blossom. This will start to appear the end of March and April and into May for the hawthorn. In January, one of our volunteers discovered some new holes made in the bank by shrews or bank voles. ponds and wetlands. In 1999, a new project was started to create a wetland area with 2 ponds for frogs and newts, with dipping platforms. This slide shows the area being marked out and the scout hut behind, which adjoins the reserve. I mention the scout hut because you'll see it on a few subsequent slides, and it shows you how the area rapidly changes. The slide shows the ponds dug out. The labour force was often boosted by volunteers from youth groups and environmental organisations from the UK and Europe, who constructed the bridge and pond dipping platforms, and afterwards they always ended up with a party. This is a view of the wetland area planting with the ponds filling. Over 500 trees and shrubs were planted on the surrounding banks. 4 years later, in 2003, the ponds were established excuse me, with margin plants, trees and shrubs. And in January 2021, even in winter, the trees now mainly hide the scout hut, which you can see here. The wetland area between the ponds is a mass of flowers in summer. Purple loosestrife, betony and devil's bit scabious amongst the flowers you can see. The ponds are home to dragonflies, including broad-bodied chasers, beautiful demoiselle, and the banded demoiselle, to name just 3. Also butterflies, frogs, and newts, including the great crested and the occasional grass snake. In the past, we have held pond dipping events. John Madden, our chairman, tells me that a lady came up to him the other day and said that her mother used to bring her pond dipping as a child. She is now married and loves to bring her children along. In 2015, a new pond was dug on the north of the reserves in Bloomers Field, and the spoil was used to extend the wildflower bank. Initially, the water and banks were disturbed by dogs and people, including children who rode their bikes in and out of the ponds. Last November, we decided to fence 3 of the ponds, and now the water is clearing, the wildlife will return, and the wildflowers can grow. And newts have been spotted already this month. The Wildflower Ditch that was created in 2010 has become a flower-rich haven in the summer for many butterflies, including dingy skippers. These first appeared in 2016 and have been, the Wildflower Ditch that was created has become a flower-rich haven in the summer for many butterflies, including dingy skippers. This is a dingy skipper. They first appeared in 2016 and have been sighted in and around the reserves ditches ever since. Ditches dry out in the summer and become a sun trap for butterflies, including the occasional painted lady. This one was photographed in May 2016, and judging by the condition, it's a migrant. Also seen in the summer are large and small skippers. The ditches were sown with seeds gathered from local sites, and many wildflowers such as betony, devil's bit scabious, and meadowsweet have spread rapidly. Devil's bit scabious is a great late summer nectar source for many butterflies, including clouded yellows, small tortoiseshells, and numerous small coppers. Another pond was dug in 2019 and surrounded initially with a dead hedge to try to keep the dogs and children out. Unsuccessfully, it transpired. It was fenced with stock fencing last November, which has allowed the water to clear, even with the extreme rainfall this winter. Wildflowers in the meadows have steadily increased in diversity and now are species rich. As the number of wildflowers has increased, so have the butterflies. A hay cut is taken in late summer and the hay is removed to reduce the fertility. Yellow rattle was introduced, and as well as being a great nectar source for insects, it is parasitic on grass and suppresses its growth. This allows other wildflowers to flourish, including bird's foot trefoil, lesser knapweed, oxeye daisies, and narrowleaf plantain. We also have a large population of moles, and the resulting molehills create areas of fine soil, and this brings the seed bank to the surface and allows seeds to germinate, thus increasing the number of wildflowers. In this slide, you can see these sort of beigey coloured seed pods. That's yellow rattle, and if you shake it, it obviously rattles. In 1996, the butterfly garden was started. It is about the size of a tennis court. Paths were laid and the area dug out. A weed membrane was laid and then covered with mulch. This was then planted up with scented plants and shrubs to attract butterflies. A hedge was planted between the adjoining quiet garden and is rapidly established. This is the same hedge today, just being trimmed on the right-hand side. In the spring and summer, you can often find a speckled wood or two in a shady corner or a holly blue. Here are some pictures of the butterfly garden in spring and summer. This is spring 2020 showing foxgloves. Due to the first lockdown, our monthly work parties were cancelled, so it became very lush in the warm spring weather. Cranesbill, which is very invasive, and other plants and shrubs. Sorry, my script jumped. Cranesbill, which is very invasive, and other plants and shrubs, including hebe, lavender, goldenrod, Erismium bull's mauve, and other herbs. Later in the summer, Verbena boreensis, buddleia, Rudbeckia, Echinacea and asters that will be in bloom. In September, hemp agrimony and sedums provide a late nectar source. There is always something in flower, and the garden is surrounded by holly, ivy, hazels and sallows. The red admirals love the buddleia, and gatekeepers can be seen on the yellow flowers of goldenrod and ragwort. In 2019, we added a pond to the butterfly garden. We initially surrounded it with a dead hedge, but it didn't keep the dogs out. So it was fenced with green mesh in November. This is a view of the pond starting to establish last summer. And this is November when we've added the fencing, which has solved the problem. Other common butterflies include peacocks, usually found on buddleias in the butterfly garden, or in this case, feeding on water mint. In late July and August, the rare brown hairstreak can be seen nectaring on hemp agrimony in the butterfly garden. This one is a male. They don't fly down from the canopy very often. However, this one was seen at 8:30 in the morning, which is very early for this elusive species to fly, normally not flying until late morning. However, it was very warm and he was taking moisture from the grass. For comparison, this is the female brown hairstreak and another photo of her spectacular underside. John Madden has walked a butterfly transect around the reserve since 2002. In that time, the number of butterfly species he has recorded has risen year on year. Up to 30 species of butterfly can now be seen flying from March until October. Transect is a fixed route walked every week from April to the end of September to record the number and species of butterflies seen. The data is then recorded onto the national UK BMS database. John has 20 years of data, bucking the national trend. It shows that the number of butterfly species on our reserves is increasing, due in part to the increasing abundance of wildflowers. The slides show the upward trend for grassland butterflies and the appearance of the small heath, first recorded in 2016, which has been seen every year since. The small heath is declining nationally, and the dingy skipper, which is usually found on chalk, has appeared. So we must be getting something right. This is a small heath, so if you walk through the reserves, you can quite often find these on the grassland and the ditches in the summer. Here are some of the other butterflies found around the reserve. This is a green vein white, which is usually found in damp areas or near water. A painted lady on the path in the butterfly garden during the 2019 painted lady invasion. And a purple hairstreak, normally a canopy species found in the tops of oak trees. Year on year, our flowers increase around the reserves. Here is a shady patch of bluebells and greater stitchwort last May. This is a rare photo of the upper side of a brimstone butterfly on a bluebell flower. They usually perch with their wings closed, as you can see on the next slide, the brimstone egg-laying on alder buckthorn. I've not forgotten the moths, especially the grass rivulet, which feeds on yellow rattle, which abounds in the meadows, but I'm running out of time. So here's a quick look at what we are planning for the future. We're planting sallow thickets to encourage purple emperors, more wildflower meadows, more ponds and ditches, more biodiversity equals more species, engagement with locals and enthusiasts, a bio-blitz in this year, and moth trapping on the reserves. Can you create a wildlife reserve near you? Thank you.